Tonight, the search for 33-year-old Wesley Koboi of St. Paul is focusing on Canada. He's accused of shooting and killing the mother of his children, 29-year-old Shaniya Thompson. Police say it began with an argument Friday night at an apartment in the Dayton's Bluff neighborhood. Koboi allegedly pulled a gun and a shot was fired. Police tell us he then dropped the kids off at his mother's house in Michigan before they believe he fled to Canada.
December 13th, 2024, St. Paul, Minnesota. Officers push open the door to apartment 500 on Broadway Street, and what they find stops them cold. Shaniya Thompson, 29 years old, mother of 5, lies on her back in the master bedroom bathroom. A gunshot wound to her head, her body surrounded by a pool of blood that's already dried dark against the tile. A handgun rests near her on the floor. Her phone sits just inches away. But Shaniya's children aren't there. They're gone. And so is the man who pulled the trigger. If you're already feeling that knot in your stomach, that need to know how this happened and why it keeps happening, then do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to Crime Lab Report, and smash that bell icon hard, because cases like Shaniya's don't get the attention they deserve unless we demand it together. Missing out means stories like hers stay buried. And that's something none of us can afford. Let's go. Shaniya Thompson wasn't just a statistic. She was described by her sister Shayna as a light in this world, a ball of positive energy, the kind of person you could count on no matter what. She had 5 children who were her entire universe, and anyone who knew her could tell you she lived for those kids. 29 years old, full of life, full of love. She was the glue holding her family together, the one people turned to when they needed strength. And on December 11th, 2024, all of that was ripped away in a single moment of violence that her children had to witness. The man responsible? Wesley Benedict Koboi, 33 years old, Shaniya's boyfriend and the father of some of her children. By all accounts, their relationship was complicated, messy, and increasingly dangerous. Neighbors knew them. They'd heard the arguments. They'd seen the red flags waving for months. In fact, back on July 4th, just 5 months before Shaniya's death, Koboi and Shaniya had a blowout argument in the apartment complex's community room. It was about jealousy, about her talking to other men, about him talking to other women, the kind of toxic possessiveness that poisons relationships from the inside out. But here's the thing that should have sent everyone running. During that argument, Koboi brandished a gun. He pulled out a weapon in a public space, in front of people, because he was angry. That's not just a warning sign. That's a siren screaming that something terrible is coming. But nothing happened. No arrest. No intervention. Life went on, and the arguments kept coming. One of Shaniya's daughters later told police that her mother and Koboi fought frequently. This wasn't new. This was their normal. And in homes where violence simmers under the surface, normal is the most dangerous word in the dictionary. December 11th started like it should have been a good day. It was one of the children's birthdays, a time for cake and presents and laughter. Koboi showed up at Shaniya's apartment that evening bearing gifts for the birthday girl, playing the role of the doting father. But beneath that surface, the same anger, the same control, the same violence was waiting. What happened next would shatter 5 young lives forever and leave a community asking the question we're all asking right now. How does a birthday celebration end in murder? Koboi walked into that apartment, and for a moment, everything probably seemed fine. The kids were excited. Gifts were being handed out, and maybe Shaniya let herself believe this time would be different. But it wasn't long before Koboi told the children to leave the living room and go into their bedroom. Think about that for a second. He deliberately removed them from the space, sent them away, and that's when the argument started. One of the daughters, and I want you to really hear this because it's heartbreaking, one of the daughters saw what happened next through a crack in the door or from where she was standing. She watched Koboi put a short firearm to her mother's head. Imagine being that child. Imagine watching your father point a gun at your mother's head while they're screaming at each other. Shaniya, in that moment, did what any mother would do. She fought back. She tried to grab the gun away from him, tried to wrestle out of his hands, because she knew what was about to happen. And according to that same daughter who witnessed this nightmare, the gun went off during the struggle. Whether Shaniya accidentally pulled the trigger while trying to disarm him, or whether Koboi fired himself, the result was the same. Her daughter believes her mother may have fired the gun by mistake, desperately trying to get away from the man who was threatening her life. The other children, the ones who'd been sent to the bedroom, heard a scream. Then they heard a loud thud. That sound, that horrible final thud of their mother's body hitting the floor, is something those kids are going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. And what do you think Koboi did next? Did he call 911? Did he try to help her? Did he break down and realize what he'd done? No. He walked into that bedroom, looked at those 5 traumatized children, and asked them if they want to go to their aunt's house. On what was supposed to be a birthday, he's standing there asking them this question like everything's normal, like their mother isn't dying in the next room. Then he loaded all 5 of them into his vehicle and started driving. 8 hours. That's how long those children sat in that car with a man who had just killed their mother, not knowing if she was dead or alive, not knowing where they were going, not knowing if they were safe. Koboi drove them all the way from St. Paul, Minnesota, to Grand Rapids, Michigan, to his mother's house. They arrived sometime between 8:30 and 9 in the morning on December 13th. His mother later told police that her son showed up with the kids and said they were there to celebrate Christmas early. A surprise visit, he called it. He didn't say much else, didn't explain why he'd driven through the night with 5 children, didn't mention Shaniya at all. After about an hour at his mother's house, Koboi left. He took his brother's vehicle and drove off without telling anyone where he was going. His mother tried calling him repeatedly. No answer, because by that point, Koboi wasn't thinking about his mother or those children or anything except running. He drove about 180 miles east of the Sarnia Blue Water Bridge, ditched the vehicle, and crossed into Canada on foot. Let that sink in for a moment. He abandoned those kids with his mother, fled the country on foot, and had already booked a flight to Mexico. This man was trying to disappear. But back in St. Paul, the truth was about to come crashing down. It was around 4:15 in the afternoon on December 13th, when St. Paul police received a 911 call that changed everything. The caller was in Louisiana, and she was frantic. Her granddaughter had just called her saying that the girl's father, Wesley Koboi, had shot her mother inside their apartment. When officers called the child directly, who was now in Michigan with Koboi's mother, they asked if her mom was okay. The little girl said she didn't know. When they asked if she'd seen her father, she said yes, and that he had a gun. That was all police needed to hear. Officers rushed to the Broadway Street apartment and forced their way inside. The scene was exactly what you'd expect from a tragedy that had been left unattended for 2 days. Shaniya's body was in the master bathroom, the gunshot wound to her head immediately visible, the dry blood telling them this had happened days earlier. The handgun and her phone were right there on the floor beside her. While those children had been driven across state lines, while Koboi had been playing the role of concerned father at his mother's house, Shaniya had been lying there alone, dead, abandoned, forgotten by the man who claimed to love her. Law enforcement moved fast. They contacted federal partners and quickly learned that Koboi had crossed into Canada at the Sarnia Blue Water Bridge just before 11 in the morning on the same day Shaniya's body was discovered. He was already gone, already trying to slip away to Mexico, already hoping he could outrun what he'd done. But you can't outrun this. On December 17th, Toronto police picked him up at Toronto Pearson Airport without incident. No dramatic chase. No shootout. Just a man who thought he was smarter than the system, realizing he wasn't. Koboi was charged in Ramsey County District Court with 2 counts of second-degree murder, both intentional and unintentional. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The children's testimony, the physical evidence, the flight across borders. Everything pointed to a man who killed the mother of his children and then tried to vanish like it never happened. But here's what we can't forget. Shaniya's 5 children are the ones left behind to pick up the pieces. They witnessed the unthinkable. They lost their mother in the most violent, traumatic way possible. And now they're facing a future without her.
We're able to take the suspect into custody in Toronto with the assistance of our federal partners.
St. Paul police says 29-year-old Shaniya Thompson was shot and killed inside her apartment by Koboi on December 11th after Koboi came over to celebrate one of their kids' birthdays. Inside, he told the kids to go to their bedroom, and moments later, the kids heard a scream and a thud.
Shaniya, she was a light in this world. She was a ball of positive energy.
Shania's sister Shayna says their family is overwhelmed with grief.
This is going to be a very long process for us just to get through this together. She was just the most amazing person. I mean, honestly, she really was. Like, if I needed anything, I knew I could always count on her.
Shayna, Shania's sister, set up a GoFundMe to help with counseling and ongoing care for these kids, because the reality is they're going to need years of support to even begin processing what happened to them. The community has rallied, but no amount of money or therapy will ever bring their mother back. So let me ask you this. What pushes someone to that breaking point where they choose violence over walking away? How many warning signs do we ignore before it's too late? And if you were one of those children, how would you ever trust anyone again? Think about that. Really think about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this conversation matters. If this story hit you the way it hit me, share this video. Get it in front of people who need to understand that domestic violence doesn't just hurt the victim, it destroys entire families. Subscribe to Crime Lab Report if you haven't already, because we're not stopping until every case gets the attention it deserves. Check out our other videos. Keep this conversation alive, and remember that awareness is the first step toward change. Justice for Shaniya starts with us refusing to look away. I'll see you in the next one.